Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dr. Welch, and this week we're going to talk about the 1920s. Uh, just a little heads up, I will be working on getting your exams graded. Please have some patience as we move forward with that. I'll get them graded as quickly as we can, but it will take me some time. So just please be patient with me, and I appreciate that. We're going to break the 1920s up into three different topics this week. And today, I want to start with American culture in the 1920s, and particularly, I want to deal with American culture really in the wake of the First World War. As you remember, we talked about the First World War as kind of the perfection of scientific death. We had had all these technological advancements. We talked about or there was a belief that technology was all for the better. And then with the rise of the First World War and tanks and barbed wire and machine guns and poison gas and aeroplanes dropping bombs from the sky, there becomes a real disenchantment with technology. There also becomes a disenchantment of regular, normal, slow life back at home. If you are a young man who has spent the last year up on the trench lines on and off, if you have been shot at, gassed, bombed, if you've even come into contact with new cultures overseas, like going to Paris on leave and hearing new music, reading new types of books, interacting with new cultures, you don't want that type of life that America had cherished before, that slow, isolated, leave me alone, rural type of life. You want a cosmopolitan life. You want a life in the city with access to the arts and concerts and music and alcohol and maybe some of that marijuana substance that the jazz players seem to smoke occasionally, and all sorts of different aspects than what life was like before. We see soldiers coming back from the First World War really chasing any new type of entertainment that they can come across as a means of living a better type of life than what they had before the war, and maintaining some of the excitement that they had had during the war. We generally call this the lost generation. These are men and also women who have been affected by the war. You can really see this in the writings of Ernest Hemingway, or if you watch the movie The Razor's Edge with Bill Murray. What we see in these artifacts are I don't really reinforcing that sense of I don't want to go back to that same sense of dull normalcy. I don't want to have to go back and deal with the same stuff. I want to have an exciting life, or I've been so overstimulated, overexcited. I just want the world to leave me alone. There is rebellion in isolation as well. So we really see in this generation of soldiers a questioning of society's morals and why they should believe in them and obey them, because they've seen humanity at its worst. And what does it honestly matter how we act or what we do? We're all going to die anyway. These are all varying manifestations of what we call that lost generation mentality. But keep in mind, it's more than just flappers and jazz and saying no to your mom. That's all an aspect to it, but it's searching for meaning in life in a way that people really had not done, perhaps since the Civil War or ever in American history. What we're going to also see is we're going to see an expansion in music and the arts during this era. F. Scott Fitzgerald and Ernest Hemingway are going to give us new modes of literature, new modes of hyper-realism, exploring this lost generation, exploring various, what the meaning of life is through fiction. We're going to have Langston Hughes and a slew of African Americans, artists, also having what we call the Harlem Renaissance. There, the Harlem Renaissance will begin with the Great Migration. There will be a movement of African Americans away from the rural South where they've been dealing with the Klan, where they've been dealing with bigotry since 1619, to be honest, and they are going to um, go forward and look for better ways to live in the cities. Some of them will go to southern cities. They'll go to Montgomery, Alabama. They'll go towards the larger industrial cities in Alabama looking for work, but they're also going to look more and more towards the north, towards places like Des Moines, Waterloo, Indianapolis, Chicago, New York City. This expansion is going to fuel industry with a new labor pool again, but they'll take this renewed sense of freedom and create new modes of art. Langston Hughes will explore the meanings of black culture through his literature and through his poetry. We'll see the birth and rise of jazz as as perhaps the most American of of music and musical expression. All this is coming through the movement in society, the interaction of African Americans with people who maybe never had interaction with African Americans before. I know that sounds crazy. There are, as late as the 1940s and 50s, there are going to be places in this nation where it's possible to not really have an active day to day or month to month interaction with an African American. And so exposure to these new cultures, exposures to new people are going to be reflected in new literature and new arts. We're also going to see a new morality. Your book will talk about the rise of women's suffrage, and we touched on it with the Margaret Sanger writing assignment and her work towards empowering women both through their own health and through political ideas such as voting. Um, the idea of a woman voting or a young 20-year-old girl saying she has dominion over her body and wants to do something more on a Saturday night than sit at home and read a book next to her parents is a radical departure from accepted cultural ideals in earlier generations. It may be that having the right to vote and having a political voice gives us a new rise of feminism and new powers for women to move and function in society. Um, that's not going to be the only challenge we see to previous moral codes, as we have in the cartoon here. Mother, when you were a girl, didn't you find it a bore to be a virgin? This is poking fun at the fact that in the 1920s, as part of the Jazz Age culture, women, often idealized as flappers, are opening up to the idea that they can be sexual beings, that they too have physical desires, and that sex is not just something that men impose upon women. They're going to exercise their dominion over their own body by getting haircuts. No longer are you going to see women with hair that, when undone, hangs to their waist or lower, that is put up in elaborate hairdos with bobby pins and hat pins and piles high on top of their head. We're going to see women with short haircuts. They're going to straighten the curls out of their hair. They're going to wear short skirts, skirts that may even expose their knees and other, such a horrible moral playground. The knee. The knee should never be seen in public. We're challenging older moralities in this culture. Maybe it's a mix of that lost generation and the survivors, male and female, of the worst war yet known to man questioning old rules about society. Maybe it's just kids being rebellious. I've never heard of that happening before. For any number of reasons, we see new roles for women and new empowerment for women in the 1920s and in that generation. We're also going to see a radical change in technology and entertainment in the post-war years. The motion picture had first come around in the late 19th century. It's a very short, flickering experience, 5, maybe 10-minute films. You could go to a Nickelodeon and drop a coin in the slot and turn a crank on the side of a machine and watch a flickering set of pictures go by depicting someone in motion doing an action. But really, the motion picture in the post-war years is going to step into its own. We'll see the development of the large studio system, something we really don't pay attention to much anymore, but certain stars used to almost belong, actually did belong to certain movie studios. And so if you couldn't wait until a certain star's movie came out, knowing that it was going to be a Paramount pick or a United Artists pick or any number of companies. Even Charlie Chaplin had his own film studio in the 1920s. The motion pictures gave you a place to go on a Saturday night. It was cheap entertainment for an hour, maybe half an hour. You could go and spend 25 cents and go see a movie, and for another 25 cents have a bottle of soda and a bag of popcorn. It allowed you to go out of the house for your entertainment. It also gave you the visual appeal of seeing other cultures, be it historical dramas, especially biblical dramas, which were very popular. The first movie versions of the Ten Commandments and Spartacus and Ben-Hur all came out in the 1920s as magnificent, epic films. The first time that people could see something put together with that much detail and attempts to be historically accurate. Something like this could be seen to reinforce your faith in the Bible because of the topic of the Ten Commandments or Ben-Hur. Some of these things exposed you to cultures from around the world. If it was a culture, if it was a movie based on Asian culture, European culture, military films, the Western is going to be the first great popular movie, and Tom Mix is going to be the first popular cowboy actor. Tom Mix will be one of the first truly popular, widespread cultural stars. You could go to Sioux Falls or Vermilion or Des Moines, and anybody would know who Tom Mix was from his movies. We'd also have the rise of the radio. Big stations like WGN, I believe it's WSM out of Nashville, WHO out of Des Moines, all started, these were all what they called blow-storch, multi-thousand watt stations that with the right atmospheric conditions, even now, if you turn on AM radio on a Saturday night, you can listen to the Grand Ole Opry on WSM from Nashville with just the right atmospheric connections and just the right atmospheric conditions. This allows people to hear music. And we have always been a people that sing, but this allowed you to listen to what was popular in Nashville, what was popular in New York City. Hey, they're going to have an hour of jazz music and an orchestra on Friday night at 7 o'clock. And you and your friends would gather around. Essentially, with the rise of radio and motion pictures, we're getting one of our first senses of a national popular culture. The popular culture is based on shared experiences that you could talk about no matter what city you went to. Shared musical experiences, shared theatrical experiences, be it in a motion picture or with the rise of the soap opera. Uh, it's getting harder and harder to explain the soap opera because there are fewer and fewer of them on the air. But if you've watched Days of Our Lives or All My Children, these are shows that actually started, some of them started in the 20s. Some of them started in the 30s on the radio as daytime dramas written for women, written for an all female audience. And they were sponsored by soap companies, by the Ivory Soap Company, by the Dawn Soap Company. It's a shared cultural experience with advertising focused at one particular group. That's what a soap opera is. Uh, we really don't see a cultural experience where one particular company uh, sponsors one program for its entire hour. That's how the soap operas got their names. They were sponsored. The entire hour of Days of Our Lives would be sponsored by the Ivory Soap Company, and these are national cultural experiences that are shared by women from coast to coast. Because at 1 o'clock local time, you could tune in and listen to Days of Our Lives or All My Children. Or at 7 o'clock that night, you could listen to Guy Lombardo's orchestra and the rise of a shared musical experience. It's it's so commonplace today that it's almost in some ways hard to find it earth shaking, but it really is a major change of events for people. That's why I'm trying to be so emphatic with it. Imagine living your life with no electricity. You live in a small town, maybe 500 or 1,000 people. Everything that happens in that town is your life, and you have very little contact with it outside of it, except for newspapers. And the news in the newspapers is 24 to 36 hours old at the newest. Now imagine within a few months, you have a movie theater. You get electricity to your house, which is being spread across America in the 20s. And now you can listen to radios. And you're listening to that same program that your friend across town is listening to, and they're not sitting next to you. Imagine how much of a change that is. It's a radical way of redefining how one looks at the world and understands it. We're also going to get a rise of consumerism, in part because of the new spread of popular culture and mass entertainment. Following the war, the market will be flooded with new cheap goods for people to buy. People will have money that they've saved up because of war bonds or short-term savings while people were deployed or because of rationing. You're going to see a rash of new products that are supposed to make your life easier, like radios, electric toasters, electric hair straighteners for women, electric fans. Imagine a world with no air conditioning, and all of a sudden you can plug a fan in your living room, and on a breezeless day, you can push cold air around your house with just this motorized fan swinging back and forth. Imagine the radical change of buying that product. We get the rise of advertising, as I've discussed with the soap opera. You can you can hear about products being advertised to pay for radio time on any station across America, but we have the rise of advertisers and advertising agencies. It's not just that we have new products for sale. Americans are being told that they need these new products in order to make their lives easier. That's where these first national food brands, electric brands like General Electric, are going to come about telling everybody we're better food. It's a better form of food. It's a better form of fan, of toaster, of Model A car. Go out and buy If you buy this, your life will be better. There's literally advertisements saying, if you buy this product, your life will be better. Saving your money and waiting until you can buy it is old fashioned. You need to go to the store, be it JCPenney's or Sears and Roebuck or Montgomery Ward's or the A&P grocery store, and you need to ask for credit because these stores are big enough, especially national brands, national chains, that they can offer their own credit cards. That means you don't have to be able to pay for everything up front all at once. You don't even have to have any cash in your pocket. America's flirtation with store credit will explode in the 1920s, all in the name of living the best life possible. The smaller stores that can't keep up, the mom and pop grocery stores, the small local hardware store that can't afford to give credit to their customers, they're going to start to disappear because they can't compete with national chains who can bring the economy of scale into focus in that little town. We have the rise of advertising, we have the rise of radio and the motion picture. I would argue one of the most important new technologies that becomes affordable and available for the average citizen in the early 20th century is going to be the rise of the automobile. The Model T, which is introduced in 1908 by Henry Ford, will be the first widely available, widely affordable car in North America. As Henry Ford himself has said, you could have any color you want as long as it's black. That's how they kept prices down. There weren't features, there weren't add-ons that you could do with your Model T. Everybody bought the same Model T. They were all black. Eventually, 15 million Model Ts will be sold worldwide. Yes, Henry Ford is famous for not inventing, but adapting to assembly line technology in order to make the Model T a cheaper vehicle to build. Essentially, if you had a job at Ford's factory, you had one job. If your job was to put the left front wheel on, that's all you did. And somebody would start off the line by putting the chassis on, then somebody would lower the body, put on the doors, put in the glass, put on the steering wheel, install the seats. Everybody only had one job because that means you don't have to train people as much. Labor is cheaper and it is faster and less expensive to build Ford's automobile than it is other early automobiles that aren't using the same system. The Model T is also a vehicle that can adapt to almost any situation on Earth. I have personally seen Model Ts that were transformed in the 1920s and 30s into some of the first rural tractors. And simply all they did, they took out the farmer took out the back seat. He put extensions on the rear axle with metal farm tractor wheels with spades on them so that they could go through the field. And they had a plow attachment that somebody made that you could buy and adapt from horse-drawn equipment. And I have seen this in use. I've seen this at old tractor shows. You could take that Model T and turn it into a truck body. You could turn it into a touring sedan. You could turn it into that tractor. The Model T was a versatile automobile that answered early America's needs for motorized work. It's not going to immediately replace the horse and wagon, but it will ring the death knell for horse-drawn transportation in this country. But beyond that, there's a social impact of the automobile. We have the freedom of the road. What's the freedom of the road? You can go anywhere you want. You can go on vacation now because, when you're driving a horse and wagon, You can only go as far as you can without having to stop to feed that horse, and that horse needs to sleep at night. The car is limited by the weakness of the driver. You can go on a vacation and drive to Chicago, or you could drive from Sioux Falls to scenic Vermilion for the weekend to stay and see what's shaking at the new at the burgeoning university in down on the bluff. You could go on a Sunday drive through the country to escape your daily woes and your really bad week. You could go see a concert or go to a dance in another town. You could go visit neighbors and relatives who lived 5, 10, 15 miles away and still make it home relatively easily at night so that it wouldn't disturb your ability to sleep and work the next day. You could go to a motor camp like what we have here pictured in from Gainesville, Florida. People will develop traveling or hotels for travelers. There's really no need for every town to have a hotel or multiple hotels prior to the car because not that many people are getting off on the train on a daily basis, and usually the boarding house can take care of them. Now with people having cars and multiple people from every direction going to popular spots, now you need motels for places for them to stay, and that's going to be an economic boost. They're going to need places to eat. They're going to need places to buy gasoline. There's also going to be a new pattern of courtship that comes up out of the rise of the automobile. People will now be able to date outside of the prying eyes of parents or relatives or chaperones. A gentleman can drive up in his Model T and get his lady and pick her up, and they can. I'm not saying everybody did it, but at least a couple of your grandparents or your great grandparents probably went out and parked on a dark abandoned road and did things that they really couldn't do if dad or mom were around with them, or even the horse. You know, it's very hard to have a romantic situation with a horse in front of you because the horse is not just going to sit there gracefully while certain noisy things might be happening in the carriage, to put it bluntly. The horse is going to possibly turn around and look, which might be a little unnerving, or the horse might start moving and you're not going to take the time to unhitch the horse in case, there's going to be a little heavy petting in the back seat. Because if the horse takes off while you're doing that, how are you going to get home? Now you can just park an automobile and turn it off. And you're in a dark, scenic overlook spot where, of course, everybody was reading books and not doing anything of questionable moral judgment. All right, this is some of the cultural changes from the 1920s. I'm going to post up about the beginnings of rural decline in the 1920s and some 1920s politics shortly. Thank you very much and have a good week.